Hey everybody, this is Dr. Osborne, founder of Gluten Free Society. Today, in part 3 of our special series on mold related illness, we're talking about how to identify hidden mold. This can be quite a challenge for some, it can be easy for others. So let's dive in. And First of all, this is not intended to be like the comprehensive end all be all tutorial on mold. I want to give you ideas of where to start. Mold predominantly can be found in two primary places. Number one, your body, and number two, your environment. So really we want to look in both areas. Now, finding mold in your body sometimes requires lab technology, sometimes requires science. And so you've got to ask or get with your doctor if you suspect mold toxicity. And again, go back and watch part 2 of this series for the symptoms on mold toxicity. But if you suspect them and it's not outright, you can't see the mold outright, then you want to ask your doctor to, number one, test for blood antibodies to mold exposure. Now, there are a number of different species of mold, including Stachybotrys, which is what many people call black mold, but Aspergillus and Candida. There are a number of types of mold, and you want to have them run a comprehensive, thorough panel looking for blood antibodies to a number of different species for mold. Number two, have your doctor test your GI tract. There's technology now that allows to identify for yeast or mold overgrowth inside of the GI tract, and you should definitely ask for that if you suspect mold as part of your problem. Number three, a nasal culture, especially if you live in a humid climate like myself down in Houston, Texas, where the climate is quite humid. And one of the more common causes of infection in the sinuses for people is not bacterial, but it's actually mold. And a nasal culture can help identify this. So ask your doctor to run a nasal culture. And then number four, there are a number of tests that can measure mold toxin excretions coming out of you. In essence, if you are excreting mold toxins from your urine or in your bloodstream, then those things can be measured, and that might give you clues or insight as to whether or not mold is part of your problem. So again, the key here is to be as thorough as possible, finding a doctor who's really versed in lab technology and lab testing to help identify mold. Now, also a doctor who understands that sometimes mold is found physically on your body. These are two examples of people that have come through my practice. Here on the left is a young child with severe yeast overgrowth of the tongue. You might have heard of the term thrush before. This is mold, right? Yeast and mold are the same thing. They are synonymous. So you've got here in the image a case of severe thrush in a youngster who is being immunosuppressed. On the right, you've got another case of severe mold growth, not only in the toenails, as you can see the yellow discolorations within the toenails and the basically the physical obstruction of the growth of the toenails. And you can also see this yellow discoloration under the nails and the fingers as well. So again, these are examples of mold growth on the body. Now, many people will say, and including doctors will say, oh, it's just a little mold growing on your toenail. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. If you've got mold growing under your nails or on your nails or on your tongue, this means your immune system is fighting but not winning, and that mold is slowly winning the battle against you. And this again is oftentimes found in people with pre-existing autoimmune disease who are being treated with immunosuppressant medications, things like methotrexate or drugs like steroids, prednisone or corticosteroids, over long periods of time cause immune suppression. And when you have immune suppression, it's very easy for the yeast that live inside of you to overgrow and start to show up on the outside of you. So very, very important. If you see these types of things happening, you've got a problem. Don't dismiss it. Now, additionally, we can find mold in the environment. I said before, you can find mold on your body, you can find mold in your environment. And so it's important to understand that, your home, your office, your car, these are all areas where mold can be commonly found in the environment. And so if you're trying to do a thorough investigation, don't just stop at your home. You want to make sure that you're not driving around a moldy car. I just was talking with somebody recently about having a major mold issue in their car, and that was creating their chronic illness. So it can happen in any one of these areas of the environment. Now, these are just examples of what to look for. Again, this is not intended to be a comprehensive end-all be-all mold tutorial, but want you to look up here on the left-hand side. What you're seeing is past water damage to a ceiling. Now, that doesn't mean there's mold, but it means this potentially could be moldy underneath this sheetrock. So these are things to look for as signs of possible mold growth. In this picture here in the middle, what we're looking at is a floorboard in the attic underneath the HVAC unit of someone, and you can see the water damage and you can see the discoloration, the dark discoloration. So this is another common example of where you might find water damage and potentially mold. Now, in this case, this was behind the sheetrock. The insulation, which should be pink, in this case yellow, it was a yellow insulation, is solid black. This is black mold growth. So this is an example of severe black mold growth after water damage occurred to the sheetrock and the mold took off and started growing behind the walls. And sometimes you don't see this on the sheetrock. That's sometimes you have to lift the sheetrock back in order to be able to see something like this. And then these are examples over here on the left bottom of, again, some areas where the wall itself was damaged by water, and you can see the little discolorations there. So these are all, just think of these as symptoms or signs that you want to look for, things that you want to look for. But where do you really begin the process of looking? Now, my advice to you would be hire an expert. Don't go this alone. Get with a good mold company, a mold investigation company, because these people do this every day. It's just part of what they do for a living, and so they're experts at it. Now, that being said, there are places that you can begin the process and look for hidden sources of mold in your home. So damage to water pipes. If you've got a front loader washing machine, these are notorious for storing mold when you open them. If it smells musty, you've got a mold problem in your washer. Look behind the refrigerator. Inside the refrigerator as well, some people have old food, and that old food can be moldy. Now, that's not typically the cause of the person's chronic illness, but more specifically, look behind that refrigerator where the water line can come in. Oftentimes those have leaks in them. Roof leaks, bathroom leaks, under the sinks where the base of the sink, sometimes there's a slow dripping pipe, and that can start to grow mold in those little baseboards underneath your sinks. As well, if you live in an area where basements are predominant, basements are notorious for mold growth. I've actually seen a number of very, very chronically sick people who had severe basement problems. Attics, underneath the water heater, the drip pan, underneath the HVAC units, the ACs. Under carpets, if you've got water damage that's happened to a carpet and it's been dried, sometimes mold will still grow even though you may dry that area out. So underneath the carpet. Underneath wallpaper. Again, these are all places to begin looking, but it's also important to know the history of water damage to the house because mold likes water, and so that's kind of the first place or the first clue that we would want to look at to begin the process. So if your house has a history of flood damage, if your house has a history of water leaks, pipes, appliances bursting, things of that nature, or if your house has a history of roof leaks, these are all potential possibilities. And so again, my advice would be to hire an investigator to come out, but share the history of water damage to your home with that investigator so that you can arm them with the knowledge to know where to really start looking and really begin the process of mold identification. Look, the reality is this. I have seen a lot of people come through the clinic with chronic autoimmune disease. They've gone gluten-free, they read No Grain, No Pain, they applied the diet concepts and principles, they got a little bit better, but they continued to struggle with poor health, and it was because of mold contamination in their homes, their office spaces, their vehicles, or chronic mold overgrowth inside of them. It's a very, very prolific problem in our modern industrialized countries today, especially where infrastructures are aging and water damage history is more and more prevalent. So don't underestimate mold as being a chronic potentiator of chronic inflammatory illness. It is definitely a major, major player in my experience. So I'd highly encourage you, if you're struggling and you've changed your diet and you've read No Grain, No Pain, and you're following the concept but not getting better, to investigate for this as a possibility or another element in your poor health. Again, this is Dr. Osborne. Want to make sure you subscribe, like, and comment below. Look, if you've had damage, if you've had water damage to your home and you've experienced mold illness, share your story with us. Your story might help shape or change somebody else's journey and help them on a better path toward better health. This is Dr. Osborne, founder of Gluten Free Society. Again, part 3 of our mold illness series. Make sure, click to the right, you're going to see a video for part 4. And if you haven't watched parts 1 through 2 at this point, go back and watch them. You'll gather enough information to get you started on looking to see whether mold is playing a role in your illness. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.